Cool. So yeah, we're gonna kind of switch gears from this week. It's been very technical, kind of processing your data, how to share it, how to get into CAD, all the complicated stuff. Today, I kind of want to focus on one of the big things is we collect billions of points. We have so much data, we have so much information and cool visuals that essentially you end up boiling down to a CAD deliverable. And the whole point of this is, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you show, hey, look we did this cool flight. We did this historical flight. I was just in Yakima and we flew a 100-year-old canal that runs like from the mountains down to the reservoir that these, the guys back in the day built in 2-foot sections. It's a really cool story. And that's kind of the focus, is telling a story, telling, what this construction is doing, how is it improving people, and then your part is, the technology, right? How many points you're gathering, and how do you visualize that? How do you get that to not the common person, but we'll go into your different audience people, your decision makers, your the regular public, municipalities, things like that. So yeah, feel free, ask questions as we go through. It'll be good. So next slide. Who am I? Why do I matter? Why should you listen to me, right? I've been in mapping and aeronautics for coming up on 10 years now. I graduated from Embry-Riddle with a degree in aeronautics and minors in UAS and flight safety back in 2015. I jumped into agricultural mapping, flying a UAV Solutions Phoenix 60, if anybody's familiar with that drone. It used wood props. It was terrifying. And we had a multispectral camera, the Mica Sense Red Edge. So it was really cool. This was before Part 107 existed. We had to work directly with the FAA. One of my favorite stories with that is we had a number of different crops that we were going to fly across the Midwest. And the FAA was like, hey, you have to submit a COA for every single one of these. And me and the other team of interns were like, we have like over 100 of these. Are you sure? They're like, yeah. So we just started submitting them one morning. And sure enough, 15 minutes later, they called us and they're like, stop, this isn't going to work. So it was very, very different time back then. After that, I actually was fortunate enough to get on with Textron Systems. They are a defense contractor. They actually brought me on for my small UAS experience. They were winding up a small UAS program for training, and I was also tied to the medium endurance program on a system called Aerison. 12-foot wingspan, drone, about 10 hours of flight time, amazing camera, mostly for intelligence and surveillance and reconnaissance. We had some other special payloads that we would fly. That was really cool. Got to go overseas a few different times, had a lot of really cool experiences there. And then I also, with Textron being such a big company, they had a venture one summer where me and another pilot got to spend the summer flying around the Midwest in a 172 with a Leica large format camera mapping crops again. So it was a blast. I had a lot of fun there. Then 2020 happened. I couldn't redeploy, couldn't go back overseas because, everything was shut down. Got on with a small survey firm in Southern California. And also that's when we began mapping with GeoQ. I remember picking up our 515 one morning out here. Next day, flew it up to Pittsburgh, flying transmission lines with, very little experience on flying. It was an M300 with the LiDAR unit, and we were flying about a mile across the Ohio River with about 800 feet of elevation change. And we flew the site probably 8 times, 8 different ways to make sure we got all of our data. As that program matured, we were averaging about 12 spans a day, and a lot of them, they were not consecutive spans. They were 20, 30 minutes down the road. So that was fun. That was great. I learned that I really like surveying. I stuck with it. I started studying for the ASPRS CMS test, which for me was pretty difficult. I didn't have my background was aviation. I didn't have a photogrammetry background. I didn't have really a mapping background. And honestly, Karen, it was a pretty difficult test. But really, really rewarding once I achieved that. And I think it's really important. So with Kuker Ranken, I did that. And then recently we became a Pix 4D trainer. That was one of the gaps that talking to surveyors more and more, I see a trend where they're wanting to use the technology. They want to be there, but it's difficult stuff to learn. And, as we know, surveyors aren't getting any younger. So that's where KR thought it was important that we become a training center so we can not only, sell somebody something, but we want to make sure that you can use it efficiently. And then currently, last year, I enrolled in a associate's degree for surveying at College of the Canyons with the goal of when I finish that, I should hopefully have the brains to take an LSIT test and hopefully one day become a surveyor. I think it's a great field. It's super fun. And yeah, so that's kind of my background. I think overall, I don't have a marketing background, but what I have is as you're building a program, you have to explain to, your management team, what is this? Why should they buy this unit? Why is this unit so cool? And a lot of times that is going into the point cloud and getting these visuals. Personal, me and my daughter, obviously, I really like land speed racing. It's something that my family and I have recently got into pretty heavily. I ride a motorcycle out at El Mirage, Bonneville, super fun. Where else can you? I've gone 150 miles on dirt. It was super cool, and it's a blast. So back on topic. So why do we need to visualize this stuff? Big thing is, the raw data. You get 100 gigabyte point cloud. How do you even use that? How do you transfer that? Not everyone is able to see that information. Brett and I were just talking about, hey, how do we get everybody set up with an Autodesk license so we can use Recap? Or how do we, the software is expensive. Companies generally don't like you just sharing login information across the whole company. But anyways, so the raw data, difficult to handle. You're not going to send a CFO 100 gigabyte point cloud and say, hey, here's our cool point cloud we just gathered. They're going to say, I'm not looking at this. And then, your visualization, turning your precision into understanding. I think we all kind of understand the difference between precision and accuracy, but how many times have you had to explain that to somebody? I thought yesterday in the presentation we saw, he had a great visual. I took a picture of it because it was so good, of visualizing, precision, accuracy. And, how do you show, a tenth versus half a tenth of noise? How do you kind of communicate that? Because all of that sounds great on paper, but you're like, well, what does that really mean? What features can I gather? Obviously, it bridges the gap with your data and then the decision makers, especially if you're able. Companies like Drone Deploy, they've done a great job with showing before and after photos, right? And Propeller, same way. You can share that information with people to take to a project manager meeting, right? Like, hey, this is the status. This is what the site's doing. It's growing and it's getting easier, which is great. And then it builds trust in the data. It's no longer this little black box that is, it comes out with CAD. It's like, well, how did you get there? One of the things, so with my original surveying firm, we worked a lot with other surveyors, either as a subcontractor or as a direct relationship. And the biggest thing was that I had to do a lot was I had to prove my data to a surveyor, which they tear it apart. They look at photogrammetry from a P4 RTK and they're like, well, how do you know this is accurate? How do you know this? And you have that conversation quite a few times. You kind of start getting a script down and saying, hey, this is the information that you need. This is how I show you it's impactful. So you get trust going. A lot of times too, your approvals, both on the project level and on a equipment level, can be sped up, right? You go to, if you're subcontracting to a bigger firm, you go to them and say, hey, look, this is the type of work we do. This is the technology that we have. This is what makes us better than the next guy. Then a lot of times maybe you get the job, maybe, they trust you more. Same thing on your management side. A lot of us are really close to the field, and then we need to communicate to our managers, hey, this is why I need to upgrade my 515 to a 540. This is why I need to, I need this unit. This is why mobile LiDAR, right, is going to be better for our use case. And So yeah, capturing that. I think you guys get that point. And then the visual storytelling, kind of what I was talking about in the beginning, where I think everybody has these really cool projects and telling the story, bringing in, I'm kind of a history nerd. And, bringing in those historical projects and like, hey, this is how we're doing it. This is how, like, I think it's so cool. One of my favorite things is, you know, blending traditional surveying practices with what we do, right? Using a total station to set targets inside of an open canal, and then flying it with modern day technology I just think it's really cool. And it garners a reputation for yourself, for your firm, which, helps you get jobs, which help you make money. That's kind of the whole goal of everything. So, target audiences. I broke it down into 4 different little buckets, which everybody kind of has their own what they care about, what's good to show them, right? You got your technical teams, you got your decision makers, marketing and outreach, and then kind of your final client customer. Your technical teams, these are going to be your engineers, your surveyors, you guys. You care about accuracy, density, a well-made classification. You think about transmission distribution lines and you're doing vegetation. They care that your lines are where you say them, that you're getting a good profile and coverage on all of your conductors. So that's where, these guys, they may be able to handle a full point cloud or maybe a part of a point cloud that they can kind of maneuver around, work with, play with. And then it's really good to show them some cross sections, side-by-side comparisons. A famous, or I don't know, famous, but a popular one is photogrammetry versus LiDAR, right? You take a profile snap of some trees with photogrammetry, you see nothing below the trees. You do the same space with LiDAR, you got ground shots. You may have some branches and stuff. And that's really important, especially when you start working with these technical teams, working out a proposal, how you're going to do it. Should you use LiDAR? Should you use photogrammetry? If you're in the Las Vegas desert and there's no trees around, no bushes, no vegetation, you have a few different options. So then we move over to our decision makers. These guys, all they care about is return on investment, timelines, project progress. It's not all they care about, but those are the big ones, right? And this is where you really start to make the cool visuals. You give them the 30-second animations, show them just, hey, this is what the colorized surface is going to look like. This is what your contours, and you're not even, it's as simple as a JPEG that you took a snapshot on from your computer to show them that information. Because half the time they're not going to want to or be able to bring that into CAD and visualize it. They're like, cool, just give me a cool picture that I could send in an email kind of deal. Or present, they could stick it in a PowerPoint and say, hey guys, this is, we moved X amount of dirt. It looked like this. Now it looks like this. And they're cruising. And then we have our marketing and outreach guys. This is where you get into your company branding, visual appeal, the clarity of, what your story is. So you get into fly-throughs, exciting perspectives. One of my favorites is, you do a long corridor of transmission lines and, you can do a nice little profile view of your line showing your conductors and your towers. But I like to, do a fly through of going around those lines, kind of getting that angle to where you can see, hey, look at, I could pull out insulators, this is what our technology can do. And they also, I think the story is a big one. I've kind of mentioned it a couple times. Your really cool projects that are making an impact. And then the next group, final group, but obviously probably one of the more important groups are your final customers, right? And a lot of clinking up there. What they care about, what sets you apart from your competition, why you're better than the next person, why you guys are more professional, how your drones, how your scanners, how your mobile LiDAR is going to make that job better, easier, quicker, more accurate, faster. And being able to provide that information to them in a useful sense is really valuable. Here, again, very similar though. The final contours, these guys might be able to use CAD, getting that CAD deliverable, which we've been learning about this week, into their hands, and then they could see, uh, where that dirt's going, how they're going to map it, um, and yeah, especially cut fill. That's a big one for dirt guys. If you can give them, hey, look at this is a report. This is what we can produce for you. Look how simple it is. Boom, here you go. So yeah, once you identify kind of who your target audience is, it's good to keep in mind how you deliver your visuals, how you deliver your data, and go from there. So we got our audiences, and now we're talking about what type of media you can create. Obviously, in point cloud visuals, so playing with the colorization views can really highlight terrain or structure. There's sometimes where the RGB, like for this site, for instance, there's a lot of dense vegetation, and a screenshot of it is just going to show green. Once you can cut out some of that, how do you show ground, what coloring, what intensity of view, hillside shading to use, it really, really brings out that point cloud. And that's something you want to keep in mind is, hey, how is this going to look like up here? Does it come across well? Can you see a good amount of point density? And then the classification, 100% adds context. If you have a really good point site where you go through it and you do a better job at classifying than I did, but you go through it, you show them, hey, this is what everything looks like when you take the trees out. This is, you're doing power lines. Look at everything is classified out nice, well, and it's really impactful. Then you get into your maps, models. So you create that hill shade DEM, contour map, a surface model, and you take a snap of it. It grabs your attention, right? You can use, it sounds kind of goofy, but use some contrasting colors, right? Obviously, if you have a dark gray tin model, you don't really want to put your contours on that in a light blue color that might blend in. You want them to pop. You can get creative, which I'm sure engineers will hate, but you can use bright colors. I like using green and red. You can even bring in your holidays. It's Halloween time. Let's make some spooky contour maps. Which is, it's those things that kind of generate interest, generate fun stuff. And then you get into videos, animations. I think these are really impactful, grab attention. 30 seconds or less really is the big one. We're talking about LinkedIn earlier, and one time I posted, it was only like a minute-long video, and it was really interesting to see the drop-off after about 30 seconds of people moving on. I guess thanks TikTok for our lack of attention span. But really, I mean, that's kind of what you're going after, right? Is that quick, you're scrolling through Instagram, and hopefully your algorithm is going to just show you a bunch of point clouds. In those quick little 30-second videos, 15-second videos, you really want to target that to your delivery medium, right? LinkedIn, you could do a little bit longer. Instagram, I think you can do up to 30 seconds, but you're really after 15 seconds. And then I think TikTok's even shorter. But that's kind of an emerging marketing tool for more companies, more firms. It's KR, we've been around since the early 1900s. I think they started making hand levels, and now we're kind of looking into, okay, well, how do we market? How do we use Instagram? And one of the surprising things that our marketing director was telling us was goofy videos go a long way. Like Leica just introduced their new total station, and we made like a spooky little, it was all with AI, but we made a spooky little ghost covered total station that kind of revealed itself for Halloween, which, those are things that gets people to look at it. And yeah. Another thing I don't show here, but can be really impactful as well, is if you can overlay your line work. With this view, say you transitioned, you did a little fade, and you showed all of your curb lines in the point cloud, would be really, really cool. It turns that just a regular CAD model that you look at two-dimensionally. Now it's something 3D, which is really neat. So how I kind of touched on it a little bit, but best practices. Clarity over complexity. What does that mean? You want to highlight what matters, get unnecessary data out. I'm a big fan of slices. I think they tell a really good story. This is one where, you see the coloring of everything's green. In the below the ground is kind of hard to tell. But you switch to an elevation mode and you can see a little bit more ground coverage. You can see a little bit more detail. And then, yeah, obviously you want to crop or clip unnecessary data. You really try not to push a point cloud out there that has a bunch of noise, has a bunch of random people in it. Even if you're just focused on a building, that point cloud information in the background of a single building can be distracting. So get it out. We have that tool where we can clip our data down and you focus your user's eyes right on what you want them to see. So yeah, coloring with intention, it makes a difference. As I was kind of saying, the trees as RGB, which, that's a really cool feature, but in this sense, you're like, it doesn't really give me what I'm looking for. Whereas in the bottom picture with this curb cut line, and this was with the 540, it's one of the reasons why I love that unit. The RGB actually is impactful because you can see the color transition from the concrete to the asphalt. You can even see a white little blip in there, which is the side of the road marking. So that's just a really cool detail that I think, adds a little bit more impact. Again, classification, I think that's another big one where you can show, hey, look at this is all the data we gathered as we class it out. You get your vegetation out, you get your ground out, you get your power lines in there, and it makes a big difference. Labels for distance height is a good one. Honestly, with that curb, we don't know if that's a 6-foot retaining wall. We don't know if that's a 6-inch curb. We don't, if you add a label there and you say, hey, this is a 6-inch curb, that's more impactful than saying, wow, look at this 6-foot wall that we got data on. It's like, well, obviously. And again, it's directing your audience's eye to what you want them to see, how you want them to see it. If you get into point spacing, you're like, hey, look, we picked up this small feature. We picked up an irrigation control box. It's 6 inches by 12 inches kind of deal. So use labels. They don't have to be in the software. You can add cool labels in PowerPoint. You can add labels in Word. I mean, there's a number of different programs you can use to make labels. I probably wouldn't use Microsoft Paint unless you're going for that look. We talked about using humor in your imagery. I don't know if you guys have noticed this trend like in the last month or so where large companies are saying like, hey, our marketing guy left, so here's a picture with like paint and it's funny and it gets views and it gets people to notice your data and remember it. So I guess that would be one use for paint. But generally speaking, on the more technical side, you want to keep your labels nice, clear, concise. Yep. And then big thing, consistency equals credibility. That goes into your company branding. Having your logo, having I didn't just randomly make a PowerPoint, Piper RGM. I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And she was like, let's put some blue in there. KR is it's a very orange company. If you're familiar with us, we have orange everywhere. And we're currently branching out and adding blue. It's a big step for us. So it's supposed to kind of highlight stuff. So that's something to think about. You want to keep it consistent, across all units, everything you make. Branding is a huge thing. If you have a larger company, you probably have brand guidelines. If you're a smaller company, you should probably make some up. And it just keeps you nice and professional and, recognizable. So a couple different marketing strategies. Your core marketing channels, obviously your company website is a big one. That's where you can kind of have denser information. You could do your white papers. You can show interactive point clouds using Poetry. is a really complicated program that I can never figure out, but you can host point clouds on there, and people can move around them. There's a lot of different hosting services. LinkedIn, surprisingly, LinkedIn's a pretty big one, especially in the professional environment. You could do short clips. You could tag your clients, vendors, manufacturers. Every post I'm tagging GeoQ, or I'm tagging Inspired Flight, I'm tagging, Leica, I'm tagging whoever I'm using in that post, in that activity, and they're impactful. I'm tagging them because chances are they're going to repost your content, which is going to push out to a larger audience. Then you have your email campaigns. These are targeted directly to your clients. You're going to do, things like your project highlights, like, hey, again, we did a really cool project. Go to our website, go to our LinkedIn page to go look at it. And then new capabilities. I think it's really good to show, hey, we can now put our 535 on our truck and do mobile scanning. And we have this new cool thing. Or even honestly, the conference, like, hey, our guys spent a quick little recap of a week of a conference. We gained all of this new knowledge. Grab a quote from yourself or your partner that was here and say, yeah, I enjoyed this conference. I learned so much. And send that to your clients. That keeps them engaged. That keeps them coming back to you. It keeps you on the front of their mind and shows, that you're progressing your technology. Then you get into your conferences, where we get, you're doing your live demos, your posters, your looped videos. A lot of it is it's in the background, right? Because you're standing around, you're talking to people. You don't want to really be at your computer showing one person a demo for 30 minutes. I get yelled at for doing that all the time because I will show somebody a point cloud for 30 minutes. And my boss is like, Francisco, you need to not do that. Like, just set up a demo time. Yeah. And then social media, we kind of hit on your Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. And I think YouTube even like pushes their short videos more than their full length videos, which is pretty wild. And then crafting the message. I have a quick little blurb there. So, 1.2 million points per second LiDAR scan. Wow, that's a lot of data. That's kind of scary. But if you said capturing an entire construction site in 12 minutes, improving project planning by 30%, a little bit more impactful, right? That's putting it out in basic terms. And you're telling kind of why it matters a little bit quicker. We're getting close on time. I'm almost done, I promise. So repurposing your work, always thinking about, hey, how can I use this project to show off my data? This scan was actually with a MS60 at the Reno conference at the Las Vegas, or the Nevada in California survey conference in Reno. We took it from a parking structure on the other side of the street, and we did a scan of just one of the facades that was probably 50 feet up, which is really cool. It came out really nice. You can do a cool render. You do a case study. You can show before and after images, screenshots. Big thing is show your expertise. Obviously, you don't want to give away your intellectual property. If you guys have, special tips and tricks that you guys use internally, you don't want to just give out, all the Kool-Aid. You kind of want to keep some of that information a little bit in the dark. So something to keep in mind. I hate marketing buzzwords. Sorry, Brett. There's not a lot of things nowadays that are game-changing. That is I despise that term, game-changing, because everything's game-changing. And you see it all over LinkedIn. Don't use that, in my opinion. My 2 cents for what little it matters. Whenever I see that, I'm like, probably not a game changer. And then again, collaborate with your vendors and partners. It shows, who you're working with. It shows, it broadens your user base. And my favorite programs, obviously, LP360, number one favorite program. The profiles, classification views are, taking just screenshots of those is really impactful. Autodesk Recap, I think, is to show off scans in a demo, especially for, terrestrial data. And we did an RTC scan of a biomed facility, and it was massive. So much information, so much data. Recap handles it quickly, easy. You're able to maneuver around there quite simply, which is really nice. Pix40 Survey, sorry guys, it's a really good tool for quickly making, contour images that you can use. And a tin, obviously, it's very limited in the amount that you can change. That's where LP definitely has the leg up, is in difficult areas, in when you need really, really, accurate data. It blows, picks out of the water. But if you need something quick and dirty that you're like, boom, here's a tin, here's contours in a few minutes, and you're not too worried about, having everything classified perfectly, it helps you out there. 3DR is a Leica product. It's really cool for if you get into modeling. And like we did a scan of a golf green, a putting green, at a recent golf tournament, and we were able to kind of make a model of the golf green, and you colorize it the right way, you add some contours, and then you tell golfers, hey, you should probably look at this, I saw your golf game, and then ha ha ha, and they remember you, kind of deal. So, and you can do a flight path, which is pretty cool. So you just set your different viewpoints and it'll fly through it, which I like. And then Clipchamp, it's on most Windows computers. It's free. It's easy to use. You can use it to edit videos. I even was able to figure out how to put a KR logo on one of my drone videos and keep it there with some cool fading in and out. It was really easy to use. That's kind of what wins me over on stuff. And with that, Q&A, that's the QR code for my LinkedIn. If you care to add me, you can also just look me up. I've had the same picture for almost 15 years now since I made LinkedIn. And yeah, any questions, comments, concerns? Me personally, LinkedIn. I think it's just, more of a technical community, more of the people that you're focused on. Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. Sweet. Well, thank you guys.